boys and girls. I'm glad to have you back here today. Ready for a new lesson? Well, put on your thinking caps and putting on your listening ears and glue your eyes to me and to our board here. And let's get started on this new Bible adventure. Today I'm going to talk to you about Moses and when he came back from where he talked to God in the burning bush, and he came to Pharaoh and said, Pharaoh, God has told me to let my people go. And Pharaoh said no. And so then God started to punish the land of Egypt with plagues. Plagues are disasters and destroying diseases and illnesses. So the first plague that God sent to Egypt, because Pharaoh didn't let his people go, was that he turned all the Nile River into blood. So all the fish died and it stank really bad. And then they had no fresh water to drink. So that was the first plague. And Moses went to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh still said, I will not let your people go. He still said no. So then God sent the second plague to the land of Egypt. And that plague was frogs. Frogs that filled the houses, the yards, and everything. And they were on people's plates and on people's heads and on people's beds. Everywhere. It was infested, full of frogs. So no one was happy. And then Moses went back to Pharaoh and said, God has said for you to let his people go. And Pharaoh once again said no. So what happened? Well, the third plague came in. And the third plague that God sent was that he sent a plague of lice and mosquitoes. And what that is, if you don't know what lice is, like little microscopic creatures that live on people's head and their hair, and they get itchy and scratchy in their heads. And you know, mosquitoes, those that you go like, they bite you, and you're always watching out for those mosquitoes. So imagine how like irritated these people were, because they were scratching their heads like crazy, and there's killing mosquitoes everywhere that were biting them. And still, Pharaoh did not let God's people go. So Moses had to tell him, well, Pharaoh, God has said, he has told you, let my people go. And Pharaoh said no. So because of that, God brought the fourth plague. And the fourth plague was flies. Flies everywhere. Those fuzzy, nasty flies that fly on everything, their food and on their animals and in their homes, everywhere, full with flies. So can you imagine? That is so nasty. Flies are very nasty. Did that change Pharaoh's heart? No, because Pharaoh's heart was hard like a rock, and he was stubborn. And Moses said, God said, let my people go. And Pharaoh again said, no, I will not let your people go. And instead of letting God's people go, Pharaoh made God's people work even harder as slaves. He doubled their work. So God sent the fifth plague. And the fifth plague was that all of their livestock died. All the cows, camels, horses, donkeys, they all died. So hopefully Pharaoh has changed his mind, right? So Moses went back to Pharaoh and said, Pharaoh, let my people go. And Pharaoh once again said no. So it's kind of like a circle. It's not taking us anywhere. Pharaoh's not changing. He's not changing his heart. He's not changing his thought of letting God's people go. So what did God do? He brought the sixth plague. And this plague was a plague, a disease that hit people's bodies. They had boils, like big bumps, red bumps on their heads, on their cheeks, on their necks, on their hands, on their feet, and it made them sick and they were hurting. And still, Pharaoh was not changing his mind. Again, Moses said, God says, let my people go, Pharaoh, and all of this will stop. And Pharaoh still said, no, I will not let God's people go. So since Pharaoh wasn't letting God's people go, God was not stopping these plagues. So what happened next? On the 7th plague, hail came down. Do you know what hail is? Hail is like a ball of ice, a big golf ball size ball of ice, and it rained hail. So if that hits you, that hurts, and that destroys property. It destroys everything that it hits. And still, Pharaoh, when Moses went back to him and said, Pharaoh, God said, let my people go. And Pharaoh did not change his mind. He still said no. So what happened next? The plagues kept coming. So the 8th plague was locusts. Locusts is kind of like grasshoppers. So the land of Egypt was filled with grasshoppers, locusts, that ate all the plants, all the crops that were on the fields. These locusts ate them all. So now they have no food to eat. They're sick. And so it just gets worse and worse. So let's see. Moses goes to Pharaoh again and says, Pharaoh, God said, let my people go. But Pharaoh again said no. So I don't know if you are seeing this pattern, boys and girls, but every time Pharaoh says no, and his heart keeps stiff and hard like a rock, and he's not changing his mind, and God keeps on sending the plagues. So the 9th plague was a plague of darkness. Just like at night when it gets really dark, you can't see anything. Well, there was no more sun. It got dark. So people were scared and they couldn't see anyone. And so then hopefully now Pharaoh would change his mind, right? Because look, we've had 9 plagues. And then so Moses goes to Pharaoh and says, Pharaoh, God has said for you to let his people go. And Pharaoh didn't change his mind. He still said no. So Moses said, look, Pharaoh, you have to change your mind. Because this next plague, this 10th plague, is going to be the worst. There's no going back. And this plague is really going to hurt you. So change your mind and let God's people go and everything will be okay. But Pharaoh still did not change his mind. So God told Moses to tell all the people of Israel, all the Hebrews, he told them, for this plague, you must sacrifice a lamb and put the blood of the lamb on your doorposts. Because what was going to happen in this 10th plague was that the death was going to come. And God said, when death comes and they seize the blood of the lamb, then it will not hurt you. And everyone inside the house will be safe. But since the Egyptians did not believe in God, they didn't obey God, and they did not pray to God, they didn't listen to God, they did not put the blood of the lamb over their doorposts. So what happened was that every firstborn, means every first child of every family that night, died. So Pharaoh's son died that night. And then Pharaoh said, "What has happened? My son, he's dead." So when Moses came to him, he said, "Moses, go now, leave with all your people. I don't want you in my land anymore. You're God and you have brought me enough suffering. Look at everything that has happened in my land, and now my son is dead. I don't want you here anymore. Leave." And then so the people of Israel and Moses left the land of Egypt, and they were not slaves anymore. They left, and God guided them through the desert. And the way that God freed all of the Israelites from all these plagues, because only these 2 plagues was for everyone. But all of these plagues were only for the Egyptians, not the Hebrews. So the way that God kept the Hebrews safe through all of these diseases, God can keep you safe and your family safe now with this disease of the coronavirus. So don't fear. Trust in God, because you see, we serve a God with mighty power, and he can do things that no one else can do. So don't forget to put your trust in God. Believe in him at all times. He loves you, and his love never ends. He's always taking care of you. And boys and girls, don't forget to pray to God and read your Bibles, okay? You can read this story in the book of Exodus, chapter 7, verse 14, all the way to chapter 12. It's a very long story, but you can do it, okay? So I hope to see you next time. God bless you. I send you a big hug, and I love you guys. Bye.